Hey, it's the Profit Answer Man, Rocky Lalvani. If you're new to the podcast, check out my interview with Mike Michalowicz. It's episode number 2. If you want to hear about each chapter in the Profit First book, go back and listen to episodes 3 through 13. Episode 1 is the why and how. On the Profit Answer Man, we learn money mastery without all the complicated accounting mumbo-jumbo using a simple system. Your accountant is busy documenting your transactions and creating a rearview mirror of what happened. My guess is you don't even look at the reports they sent you. If you're like most business owners, you struggle with this, and it's not your fault. We aren't taught money in school, and accountants aren't taught how to be profitable. The Profit First system created by Mike Michalowicz works, and he certified me to help you implement the system in your business. Remember, the new equation is sales minus profit equals expenses. Let's face it, without cash flow, you can't pay your employees, buy needed materials, or pay your mortgage and support your family. I help you to do that and more, so you can focus on the parts of the business you love and receive the rewards for your labor and investment into your business. The stronger you are as a business owner, the more jobs you create, the better we are as a country. Small business owners are the backbone of America, and for that, you deserve to be well rewarded. Just remember, more revenue does not equal more profit. That's why we focus on the bottom line. Today, we're going to chat about how you can increase your prices and how psychology plays a big part in how consumers will react. As we go through these examples, think about your business and ask yourself, how can I apply this to my pricing and how I look at my offerings? More importantly, understand a small change in pricing at the top line makes a massive change in profit and what you keep at the bottom line. Robert Persichitte is a CPA, a CFP, and he's guided business leaders and individuals with financial and investment decisions for over 10 years. He's an accountant at heart and an award-winning analyst known for using data to make sound decisions. He is driven to help clients invest wisely while avoiding scams and other pitfalls of investing in personal finance. His financial company is dedicated to helping consumers avoid and recover from financial pitfalls. They offer tax, accounting, and financial planning services. Let's meet Robert and learn how to increase our prices. Welcome to the Profit Answer Man, Robert Persichitte. It's great to have you join us today.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Can you share a little bit about yourself and your business?
Yeah, so I am a accountant in my soul, is what I like to tell people. I have been doing accounting in various different capacities for over a decade. I am an accounting professor at the Metropolitan State University of Denver, and I run my own business. The goal is to help people keep their money. The way that we do that is through financial planning, financial advising, that really focuses on avoiding mistakes, ripoffs, and taxes. We're called Delagify Financial.
And I love that. That's what we all need. We're not going to talk about accounting today because none of our listeners want to hear about accounting. What they want to hear about is profitability and how do we improve it. And we really haven't spent a lot of time talking about behavioral economics and pricing. And so I'm looking forward to that. So I'm going to ask you to introduce concepts. We'll talk through them and we'll share how they actually work so that our business owners can look at their businesses and say, hey, is this something that we can somehow implement to increase our pricing or make sure that we're offering the most profitable products to our clients?
Mm-hmm. Well, and not to get too far into the weeds with the math here, but it's a very simple equation for profit, right? We have our revenues minus our expenses. That's our profit, right? That's it. It's not, accounting is very simple and beautiful. And we have two ways to handle this. We can increase our revenues or we can decrease our expenses. Those are the only two ways to increase our profitability in the end. And one of the things that I think is really interesting is a field of study called behavioral economics. And where this really came about is economists built their models and they built how people see the world, how people view the world on some false assumptions. And some of those false assumptions are people operate with perfect information. So you are aware of every other price out there, that you know what's going on. That's obviously incorrect because some people might pay more at another retailer for the same exact good. The other one that is incorrect is that people are rational actors, meaning if you have two prices and the goods are exactly the same, exactly identical with the same exact inputs, the same exact benefit to it, a rational person would always choose the cheaper one. They would always choose whatever costs the least. And people started studying this more closely and found, no, people are not irrational. Sometimes people make decisions based on completely arbitrary things that have nothing to do with the value of your product or the value of what you are trying to accomplish, what you're trying to do. People are subject to tricks and they kind of fall for things that don't really make sense from a strictly mathematical economics viewpoint.
And that's what we're going to discuss today. How to use that to our advantage. So let's start with matrix pricing. Can you explain what matrix pricing is and how we would use it?
So matrix pricing goes into profitability because it's describing what is the most valuable product in our lineup. Where this came from originally is the hospitality industry and specifically restaurants. It's an idea where you're offering lots of different things to your customers. Some of those are going to be more popular and less popular. Some of those are going to have a higher margin and a lower margin. And that's naturally going to occur. And by margin, I mean how much money you get to keep. So what is money in your pocket after your expenses. So ideally, if we could control our customers and we could influence them, we are going to move them into products that are highly profitable and highly popular. If we were a restaurant, for example, we had a menu. Ideally, there is one menu item that we have a large profit margin on, and everybody orders that one thing, right? That would be the ideal dream scenario. The problem is that's not going to happen. That's never going to work. And we need to have these other pieces here. So to execute the matrix pricing system, you start with each of your offerings and you put two scales. Up and down, you have your profit margin. Left and right, you have your popularity, and place them on that chart. Anything that has a low popularity, if it's low popularity, low margin, we get rid of it. We don't want to waste our time doing it. If it's low popularity, high margin, we want to promote that and try to increase the number of people taking advantage of it. So if you've been to a restaurant, it tends to happen more with corporate restaurants because they have the same pricing model. They're just very consistent with their training. You might hear a server say, hey, do you want to try this new appetizer? What you can secretly hear now that you know the secret to it is, hey, do you want to try this thing that makes our company a lot of money? We can sell this to you for double what it costs us to get, and we really want everybody to order it. When you hear the servers pushing for those few specific menu items, that's usually what's happening, especially in a corporate setting, right? It's something that is popular and profitable. If something's very profitable, if something's very popular, but not as profitable, then we can increase our prices. Again, we're trying to get everything to the point where it's both popular and profitable That is the whole goal behind this pricing structure.
And that makes a lot of sense. And then from an advertising and marketing standpoint, if you're not a restaurant and you're going out into the world and you have put advertising dollars behind different things, you can make sure that you do it appropriately. So you don't want to put advertising dollars behind something that may not be so easy to sell and requires a lot more marketing behind it. So again, the same kind of concepts expanded.
And to take that even one step further, you don't want to market something that loses you money. So if it has very low margin, it doesn't matter how many you sell. If you're losing money per unit, it doesn't matter how many you sell. You're going to just get further and further in the hole. You got to focus on the products that make you money.
Correct. And I've noticed this sometimes with some of my online retailers is they start putting advertising dollars behind a particular product. And then when we add up the gross margin and the advertising dollars, all of a sudden what was profitable now becomes unprofitable. And then it becomes a question, well, it doesn't make sense to advertise this because at the end of the day, unless you just need to clear it out, you're losing money. So how do we appropriately pick and choose where we're going to put our time, money, and efforts?
Yeah. And there's an old joke here. So there's an accounting guy and a finance guy, and they're sitting around. The accounting guy says, we're losing money every unit we sell. And the finance guy says, don't worry, we'll make it up on volume.
Yeah, that'll never happen. Anything else on matrix pricing before we jump to some of the other behavioral economics themes?
Well, just to kind of summarize it, really behavioral economics is a tool that helps us to leverage this matrix pricing. And so when we want to get somebody to like something or move something into one of these other categories, again, the goal is everything is profitable and popular. There are some tricks. There are some tricks that we can play. And I don't want to make it sound like it's dishonest or anything. It's just that humans' brains are hardwired to react a certain way to certain inputs. And when we're sharing our prices, when we are working with people determining this pricing, those tricks can work to our advantage. And it can be something as little as the order that you describe things in, or the context in which something is presented can completely change what someone's perceived value is. And if you can control that perceived value, you can control how much somebody is willing to pay.
So let's talk about one of these. One of these is called anchor pricing. And anchor pricing is basically putting out a large price first and then offering something else at a lower price to make it more reasonable, shall we say. I think you had an example that you shared with me of a bread maker from Williams and Sonoma.
Mm-hmm. So this is a story. You can read about it in the book Freakonomics. They talk about this at length in there. Initially, Williams and Sonoma had trouble selling bread makers. They were not the first. They did not invent bread makers, but they were one of the first companies to really push it to the market and try to get a widespread adoption of this. They initially priced it at $300, and it was a terrible failure. It did not work. People weren't convinced that it was a good value at $300. They did not give up on it. And some very smart marketing people went out there and said, well, let's not try to sell just the $300 one, because $300 for a bread maker is hard to evaluate because it's not tied to anything. There's not a comparison for this. Many of the consumers who are buying this are buying it for the first time, and they don't have any frame of reference. So they introduced a new model, $500. It had very, very superficial changes to it. And the examples that they gave is that it had chrome plating on it and some better, there were more options in the menu. So if the basic one was low, medium, and high, This would give low, medium, medium, high, and high. They could do basically the same exact task in the same exact amount of time. One was $500, one was $300. This now gave consumers a point of comparison and a point of reference. So you're looking on the shelf and you say $500 for a bread maker. That sounds like a lot of money. Wow, there's one that's $200 cheaper. What a bargain. How that is almost half the price for a machine that does almost the same exact thing. And their intention was not to sell the deluxe model. Their intention was to give consumers a frame of reference, and sales were better when they were compared side by side. The whole idea is, it kind of sounds silly, it kind of sounds arbitrary, but it even works with numbers that have no inherent meaning. And so I'm going to run through a quick exercise that I love to do when it comes to anchoring. Hopefully you didn't look in the show notes to get the exact numbers here. I'm going to give you a fact. This is a true fact. The Tongass National Forest is the largest forest in the United States. It is about 17 million acres. The Amazon rainforest is a rainforest, so slightly different, but that is the biggest in the world. Any guess as to how big the Amazon is? Again, Tongass is about 17 million acres.
100 million?
It's 1.3 billion acres. It's 1.3 billion. Once you have that number, and you could think about how you felt listening to this. Once you have that number, what is a reasonable amount of acreage for a forest? I anchored that. I put that in your head. We could have compared it to something different, like the Sahara Desert, which is much bigger than the Tongass National Rainforest, right? That would have a different number in your head. I could have put any number in your head, and studies have shown, even if I give you a number without context, it's going to influence the answer to my next number-related question. So if I tell you, hey, I just want you to think of the number 500 million, how big do you think the Amazon rainforest is? Those answers are going to be skewed closer to that number with no context. It's just one of those little quirks of how the human brain works, and one of these very well-documented tricks where people behave irrationally.
You know, along these pricing models, what I have heard is a 3-tiered pricing, and there is a ratio, and I think the ratio is 1 to 5. So if you're offering 3 products, you have the basic at 100, the product that you really want to sell the most of at 200, and then your anchor price product at 500. And nobody wants to buy the cheapest, so they all naturally go to the middle at 200. And again, the purpose of the 500 is just to make that doable. Even like, I know Costco does that, or we have a Wegmans, you know, they'll have a couple of super high priced items in their store to make you think it's super expensive, but then they have the reasonable priced items mixed in that you now think are cheap. And it's that same concept that you are talking about with regards to that.
I initially learned about this when I was in college. When I was working my college job. When I was in college, I worked selling cameras. I was in a camera store selling cameras. And I called the manager and I say, hey, I need to get this professional camera on display. He says, nobody is going to buy that. And I say, that might be true, but please just trust me. I need to get this professional camera here in the store where people can see it. We didn't cater to professionals. We catered to regular consumers. But I got the reason I wanted to do that is I got frustrated because people would come in and say, what's the best camera you have? And now I had an answer. I would say, they'd say, what's the best camera you have? Well, it's this full frame camera. It costs $3,500. And then, whoa, hold on a second. I have some parameters that I wanted to add in. I didn't want to spend that much on a camera. I thought cameras cost $100 or $200. Well, some cameras do cost $100 or $200. Some cameras cost, $3,500. why don't I sell to you a camera right down the middle of $1,000 camera? And that's more than most people would have bought before. But again, them seeing the big number, it completely changes your mental framework of how you're dealing with numbers.
And that's what it's all about, setting frameworks and so forth. You had another example where you were sharing about coffee and different spices. What was the lesson to be learned with that one?
So this is another one where arbitrary things can really influence our opinions. This example comes from Dan Ariely's book, Predictably Irrational. And he did a study with Duke University. He did a study where he wanted to see how can we change people's perceptions of our product, and how can we change their perceived value to a product. So he had a experimental coffee shop, and he would change things about this coffee shop and then survey the customers on whether or not they thought it was a good deal or a bad deal, whether or not it was good coffee or bad coffee. And one of the tricks that he really got excited about, he went to high-end coffee shops and saw that they had a much broader assortment of spices than, just your standard cream, sugar, maybe cinnamon or cocoa powder if you're feeling really fancy, right? He saw more condiments translated. He associated that with the higher end, the more expensive coffee shops. So he says, well, how far can we take this? What's the extent that we can do with this? So he started out putting out very silly condiments. He put out things like paprika. And he noted that nobody used these condiments in their coffee. Not one person who went through the store actually used them in their coffee. They could just see them amongst the other condiments. And once people did that, once people saw the fancier stuff, they had the perception that this is a fancier product, their perception of the coffee went up. They thought it was a higher quality coffee. Now, this is not their assessment of the store. This is not their assessment of the condiments. This is their assessment of the coffee itself, which, as a reminder, never changed. They didn't add the new condiments to it. They didn't change how they brewed it. Nothing changed except for the fact that there were more spices here. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's very subjective. That's something that people don't really understand. He took it a step further, and he did experiments with wine, and I'm sure everybody can think of an experiment with tricking a wine expert or giving someone wine, telling them that it's good when it's really not. He wanted to do that because it's kind of in the same vein, right? Our expectations about the product dictate how well we enjoy the product. He put people in an fMRI machine. It's a machine that measures your brain waves and looks at how your brain is physically working. And he measured the activity in the pleasure centers of their brain. These people who were lied to and had the expectation that the wine was very good, their pleasure centers lit up more. They literally enjoyed it more. It's not just them trying to give the answer that fits or have the what they feel is the right answer. They are physically enjoying the product more based on completely arbitrary things that are surrounding them. And so that framing, not only, going back to before, some people feel like it's deceptive or a trick. That framing measurably makes people enjoy the thing more. They are happier with it if it is framed properly.
It's funny, we were at a wine tasting, I think it was last year, and they recreated the Paris wine tasting. And once again, the $50 bottle of wine beat the $500 bottle of wine. It's when you don't show people all the labeling and all of the hoopla, and you just tell them to taste it, you get a very different answer. And so we can play these games all different ways to make it so. It's not, and I think the takeaway here is, it's not how great your product is, it's the perception of how great your product is. And someone may have something that is nowhere near as good as what you have to offer, but everyone thinks it's better because that's the perception. So you've got to learn to play the marketing game as well.
Mm-hmm. And it's not, it's going back to what I was saying. those pleasure centers in the brain are lighting up based on the perception of it. It's all part of our buying experience, is what a lot of these scientists are finding in this discipline of what you hear about before you get the product, your purchase experience, and things that you experience or see after you get it, all filter into how much literal enjoyment, how much happiness did we create with this.
So let's take another avenue with this. Let's talk about fish and rebranding, because the name has a lot to do with what people like.
So this is something from the restaurant industry, and there are two examples that were, it looks like, done for profitability. I don't know what was in the hearts of the people there, but it was simply so they could charge more for something. And the two that I love are the slime head fish has been renamed the orange roughy. So if you were buying it in a fish market, it used to be called slime head. That the way they prepared it was fine, and they were able to get it to people, and people enjoyed it a lot more when it's called orange roughy. Another example of this is the toothfish, which is actually, in my opinion, pretty hideous as far as fish go. That's why you don't see them as much in the grocery stores unless they've already been prepared and filleted for you. And where you've probably heard it is as a Chilean sea bass. Chilean sea bass. Toothfish, Chilean sea bass, the exact same thing, just with a marketing change. And this is expanded and has really done something that I think is amazing from a ecological standpoint, from a world impact standpoint. People who care about this type of thing, biologists, people who make their living from the sea, are now doing kind of that same trick, and they're doing it with invasive species. So tiger shrimp are an invasive species in the southeast, and it's actually kind of a big problem in places like Alabama. They grow to be very, very large because they have no natural predators there. And a very smart business person figured out, well, hey, there's overfishing, and that's getting rid of all the fish, and that's bad. We don't want to do that. But we have fish in a place where we don't want the fish. So why don't we just overfish them there until they're all gone? Let's just overfish all of the tiger shrimp from Alabama until they're all gone. And so these wild shrimp are getting rebranded. Another one that they're working really hard to get around is lionfish in the Caribbean. If anyone's ever seen a lionfish, very, very beautiful. Lots of colorful spines. People were initially really freaked out because they are poisonous. The spines are poisonous. You can't eat the spines. But if you prepare it, allegedly, it tastes like lobster. I've never had it. Comes back to the same thing. Hey, everybody, go out and overfish this. Why that is so perfect, why it's so perfect from a business perspective, is it is now dirt cheap. You have lionfish that is very, very easy to catch, and you can catch a lot of it, and you can catch as much as you want without those restrictions. As long as you can find a partner who is working to catch it, you can put it in your restaurant for a very comparatively low cost. It now just comes down to that marketing and selling to your customers. This is really good. This is really delicious. This is going to be my feature dish, what I really like. That's kind of the tricky thing. And you might be thinking, that's impossible. You can't move the markets that way. Another example with this is buffalo wings used to be thrown away. They used to be discarded as part of the chicken butchering process. But people bought them because they were so cheap, and they fried them and put sauces on them. And then customers said, hey, this is actually pretty good. I like this part of the chicken. And so we see those prices now starting to rise to the point where people are making up new types of chicken wings, like boneless chicken wings, which are really reprocessed chicken breasts, and kind of starting the process all over again.
So I was talking to my local restaurant guy, and he was complaining about chicken wings. He said they are now the most expensive cut of chicken for him to buy. COVID kind of threw that market for a loop. They've gotten expensive. It is quite incredible. Speaking of things getting expensive, let's talk a little bit about inflation. What are you seeing? What do we need to know? What do we need to do differently?
Well, inflation plays into the pricing so closely and so intimately, because if your input costs are changing, like we're seeing those chicken wings going up, they're increasing the cost of that dish to the business owner. That means it's eating into that margin. We got to do something about it as a business owner. We got to do something about it. We have to respond. I think the easiest way to respond, maybe I shouldn't say the easiest, the way with the least amount of upfront effort is to increase prices and just pass those costs on to the consumer. We see that happen a lot, but it's always dangerous. Every time that happens, you might lose clients. There are people, you might have also heard of some kind of sneaky ways people have gotten it in there, like shrinkflation, where people are giving smaller sizes to their customers or scaling back the level of service that those customers are getting while charging them the same price. And it really kind of integrates well into what we're talking about, because we need to make sure that whatever our value that we're communicating with our clients, that we're getting a shared understanding, our value is in line with our prices. And anytime that our prices are higher than the value that we're building, anytime that we cannot justify that price to a customer, to a client, then we're done. We can't go any further. That becomes the biggest impediment of it's not worth it. It's not worth my money. It's not worth my time. It's just not worth it. And nothing shuts down a conversation faster than that. And so as you respond to inflation, number one, continuously reevaluate margins. Things are moving around. Where this tends to be much more impactful right now is labor and energy costs. So things that have a lot of labor costs, things that have a lot of energy costs might need to go into that unprofitable section and then brainstorm, how do we get it back to profitable? Do we raise the costs? Do we raise the prices? Do we decrease the value that our customers are getting? Or are we doing something else? Are we going to change to a more profitable product offering that wasn't as impacted by energy and labor? It all comes down to those same values. It really does.
You know, it's funny because I was talking to that same restaurant owner, and we were just talking about the input costs in food. And he's like, you're missing it. He goes, this is where everyone focuses, on the input costs of food. He goes, but you know where I'm leaking all over the place and nobody's even looking at it? My paper plates, my napkins, my throwaways. He goes, all of those prices have soared and nobody's even paying attention to this stuff on the side that's causing me to lose a lot of money. And so, again, it comes back to focus, right? Are we looking at all the different inputs? Are we paying attention to the little things and the things that may seem insignificant, but over time become significant? And I will tell you, in the building industry, if you have not been watching your input costs, especially in the early part of COVID, you got in trouble. And now it's just nuts. They have had to change the entire way they write contracts, they do business, everything else, so that they can maintain their profitability and get rid of the risk of price increases that they're unable to control. So all of these things come together, and you've got to think about your pricing, your inputs, think about, how do we increase prices? How do we make our products more valuable to our clients in a way that they will respond well. If people would like to learn more about you and find you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Best way, head to the website, delagify.com, delagify.com. You can sign up for my newsletter. You can see some of my posts. Again, we're really focused on making sure that people keep their money, avoiding scams, avoiding paying too much.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
If you'd like for us to be a part of your profitability journey, we have different programs available ranging from do-it-yourself to one-on-one coaching. Our course, The Profit Blueprint, teaches you everything you need to know to transform your profitability. There are 3 different tiers ranging from DIY to done with you so that businesses of all sizes can get the support that's best. Join the waitlist in the show notes to get more information and be a part of the next cohort. If you want a done-for-you service, you can hire us as your Chief Profitability Officers. We only work with a handful of clients, so they all get our full attention. We work with business owners who have or are growing to $500,000 to $10 million in revenue. You can use the scheduling link in the show notes to get on our calendar for a good fit conversation to see if we're the right people to support you and how we can help you.
This episode of the Profit Answer Man podcast is brought to you by SMBpodcastnetwork.com. The network is a collection of podcasts and shows from around the internet which focus on bringing you interviews with amazing guests who share actionable advice, ideas, and information for small and medium-sized business owners and entrepreneurs. Visit www.smbpodcastnetwork.com to find more great shows and easily subscribe to be notified of new episodes. It's a great way to discover quality content. If you've discovered us via the network, then I hope you enjoy today's show and will consider subscribing directly so you never miss our episodes. Don't forget to check out my other podcast, Richer Soul, where we talk about life beyond money and how to live that ultimate life and become a better leader in your company. As we close out, let's repeat the mantra. Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king. Have an abundant and profitable week.